And what we were just doing with Peter, receiving finances and for the property and stuff, that's part of the new covenant. That we the new covenant. That's the end. That's my main point. I'm going to share it to what you guys were at first. The new covenant is actually between Jesus and God. It's not between us and God. The new covenant, it's between Jesus and God. And in Christ, by faith, we step into that perfect covenant. That's why we can't do nothing on our own. We can't work. You can't do enough, good deeds to be accepted by God, because the new covenant is a covenant between God and Jesus, and by faith, we receive all the benefits just by faith, just by believing. So I'm going to speak to you about covenants, the old covenants, and there's 5. Okay, I'll start with this. In Hebrews 13:8, it says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? Everybody kind of knows that scripture. We quote it all the time. So if God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then why is it that, this is a question that I ask myself, and then I've learned them from my school, is that in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, sometimes God, he seemed unfair. He seemed like a mean God, an angry God, a judgmental God. And why is that? I asked because it says that, in 1 John 4:8, it says that actually God is love. So if God is love, how come he did some pretty crazy stuff in the Old Testament? And even in the New Testament, and I'm going to get to that later, there's a few things that he did that I question, well, you did that after the cross. And why? And I learned why. So, and we're going to get to that after. So, all right. Everybody knows what this is? This is the Bible, right? You hear funny things sometimes. People will say, this is the Bible, the basic instructions before leaving Earth, right? Some people call it a law book, a book of rules. Some people even say that it's God's love letter to us, which is, it's kind of nice, it's cute, but I don't know. In this letter, it says that I can't eat lobster or bacon. So to me, that's not a love letter. I send that back. If I get a love letter like that, I don't want it. I can't eat bacon. So, but the Bible is, it's God's written. It's a written record of God's covenant journey with man. Okay, that's what it is. It's a covenantal book. And so that's what we're going to look at. Look at the Bible and understanding the whole Bible with a covenant mindset. Okay? So, because sometimes we look at the Bible, we have different kind of filters. Sometimes the way we're brought up, a lot of us probably around here were brought up at the Catholic Church, and we're brought up with certain mindsets that we believe in God or whatever, and they're filters. And some of us, even after we get born again, I still think sometimes we see God in a certain type of way. There's a few different kind of filters in our circles today, even at the churches that we attend. One major filter is dispensationalism. That's a filter that is in our charismatic churches. It's in Pentecostal churches. It's in a lot of different denominations. And I don't know if you guys know what dispensationalism. While it's seeing the Bible, in dispensationalism there's 7 major dispensations. I don't really know them all by heart, but it starts from Adam and Eve, and it goes to Abraham, David, to Jesus, and it has different dispensations. So dispensationalism, the way they believe right now, the time that we're in this time, they actually don't believe we're in the kingdom age. They believe we're in the church age. So that's where, you have some teachings about like rapture and these different kind of teachings. They come from that because they believe we're in the church age, and then we get raptured, boom, we're gone, and then the kingdom comes. So me always asking questions, I always say, well, that's because that's the teaching that we hear the most. We hear it on TV, we hear it everywhere. There's movies, So, but to me, I always question, because God says that the kingdom is at hand and the kingdom is now. And even at church, in the churches I attended, I would hear a mixture. So I say, well, it doesn't really seem to make any sense. Are we in the kingdom or are we in the church age? Are we waiting for God to take us out? Or, so that's a filter that we have. And when we understand the covenants, you'll see that some of these filters, they drop right, and it's like you understand the Bible a lot clearer. So that's one dispensation. You got, you have Calvinism, Calvinism is a different filter. You see that more in real conservative Baptist churches. They don't believe in the gifts. They believe that the gifts have ceased, and they believe that not everybody makes it. Like that Jesus didn't die for everybody. They actually believe that there's an elect, that some are predestined to actually go to not make it. They're predestined to go to hell. So this is what they believe. There's 5 points of Calvinism, and they believe all these doctrines. It became popular with a man named John Calvin. And it's actually, he's not the actual one that actually started that doctrine belief, but he made it popular. It comes from way, way before. I think John Calvin was in 1500s, 1800s, or no, before that, 1500s. Well, he became popular afterwards. So they see, and some of these are prominent Bible believers, have big ministries or on the radio, but they see the Bible with this different kind of filter. We don't see it like that, because they don't believe. They're dispensationalists also, so they don't believe that the kingdom is now, So for us, we're like, well, the kingdom is right now. Like you're telling me the kingdom's not right now, but the kingdom is now. So we have to try to figure it out. Like, I got questions. So those are the type of filters that are floating around, and so I'm not saying that if you hear a preacher that is preaching from that kind of viewpoint, not everything he says is, false prophet. We don't have to go there because that's immature of us to do, because they have some points of their doctrines and their belief systems that are foundational and that we all believe. So it is good. So, we don't want to cast everybody out and, throw the baby out with the bathwater. That saying, I'm not sure. So those are some of the filters anyways that there's floating around, and I had that filter for a long time. That's what I've seen. But we're going to look at the Bible in covenantal. So I'm going to explain to you the 5. I'm going to do it pretty quick. What time is it?
Clock right there. Yeah.
How long do I have?
We can do it in 2 parts.
Okay. Because there's so much, I learned so much, and I'm just trying to put it at a general, so you kind of get an idea. Even just a general idea of it, it's going to set you on fire. It's going to be like, oh man, it's just like, woo!
Man.
It just, in such a great way, and not in a way where before, like for me, I've been a Christian for 10 years, right? So not that long, but the first couple of years I got right into the Bible. I listened to everybody, and all this knowledge started coming, and then I started being a little bit like, I would see older Christians, and I would maybe criticize them and say, like, I would tell them something, did you hear about this? And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, be a little bit criticizing and judgmental because I had so much knowledge. But this knowledge doesn't puff you up. This knowledge just frees you. It actually frees you and liberates you. Because once you understand the new covenant, it's like, wow. It's just like, when you meet Jesus, you can't go back. If somebody tells me, well, I met Jesus and they're not there anymore, they backslid or whatever, I say, well, didn't meet the same Jesus I met, that I met, because I haven't been perfect either. But when you meet Jesus, that's it. Your life is over, or your life is just beginning. So All right, so the 5 major covenants in the Bible are the Noahic covenant. That's the covenant with Noah. The second one would be Abrahamic covenant. The third, which is the one I'm going to talk about the most tonight probably, is the Mosaic covenant. And then there's the Davidic covenant with David, and then the New Covenant. So those are the 5 major covenants in the Bible. Those are 5 major big stories. So in these 5 major covenants, this is where hopefully you guys don't lose me, but there's 3 types of covenants. Okay, there's 3 types of covenant. And these covenants, the types that I'm telling you about, you can go research them on Google, and you can really do a lot of research just on each one. So the first covenant is a grant covenant, and that's the best covenant. That's a covenant where you have a king blessing a lesser king with no strings attached. It's like me. I go to tomorrow. I receive $1 million from somebody. And I go to Peter and I say, "Here, Peter, here's $1 million. That's for the property. That's for the ministry. Here you go. That's it." And Peter says, "Well, what about, no, I'm giving you this. This is yours. It's a pure blessing. Boom. I don't even want no tax receipt, nothing. This is yours. No strings attached. It's the best covenant. You don't owe me nothing. You can't do anything. You can't even bless me back. It's the best covenant." So then the second covenant is called a kinship covenant, which it would be more like a marriage covenant, where you have 2 people that come together, and then you have a set of rules. You have a contract that you gotta go by. If you do this, you'll be blessed, and if you do that, you'll be cursed. That's a kinship covenant. It's not totally the best. It can work, but it takes work. You got to do something. You got to do something for it. And the third covenant, which is the worst covenant, is basically when you have like a king that rules everything, rules all the people, and the people don't have no say whatsoever. But you're under my rule, and you got to submit, and that's it. Huh? Dictator. I think you might call that communism, maybe in modern terms. So that's a vassal covenant, and another name for that covenant is called a suzerain covenant. Sometimes you'll hear it that way. So these covenants, you can research those. There's a lot of information on those covenants. So we have, those are the 3 types of covenants. So the one I want to look at the most, well, first of all, I'll tell you which one was what in the 5 major ones. The Noahic covenant, which was between Genesis 1 to 11, that was a grant covenant. Okay, that was a grant covenant. God came and he made a grant covenant with Noah. There was no strings attached. The second one was the Abrahamic covenant. We're a lot familiar with that. The blessings of Abraham, all the blessings. You're going to be blessed of nations, and as much as the stars can, the sands of the sea, and all that stuff. Like, this is the covenant that he made with Abraham. No strings attached. It was a good covenant. The promises were awesome, and they were great. With the Mosaic covenant, that's where we end up in some. That's where there's a lot of stuff happening with Moses and the Israelites. So the Mosaic covenant, it was a kingship. It is a kinship covenant at first, and it actually became a vassal covenant afterwards. Okay, and so this is where we're going to park there for a second. But the Davidic covenant, it was a grant covenant too. It was all promises. It was all good. But during David's time, though, the old covenant was still in operation. But the promises that God gave him, they were grant covenant. It was all good. The seed the seed I'm going to give you is going to be the seed that reigns on the throne of heaven, which was the promise of Jesus, right? So, and then we had the new covenant, and we basically know that the new covenant is a grant covenant. The new covenant with Jesus, what Jesus did for us. There's nothing that we can do. All we do is say, "Jesus, I'm here, I'm saved, I'm going to heaven, and the kingdom is here, and we're blessed, and we're going to be blessed, and we're going to advance your kingdom. So I just want you we're going to look at the Mosaic covenant for example, just to show you that, because my question at the beginning was, why is God acting a certain way sometimes if God is love and all loving and this and that, right? So I just want to keep that in the back of your mind. So if we go to Exodus 19, so Exodus 19, if you read from Exodus 1 to 18, that's when God, he leads the Israelites out of Egypt, and they go through the Red Sea, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. Sunday school stories that we hear in Sunday school, all that stuff. So, and then they get to Exodus 19. That's when they get to the bottom of the mountain, Mount Sinai. They're at the bottom, and I'm going to start reading in verse 3. Okay, it says, "Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called him to him from the mountain and said, 'This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourself have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagles' wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant,'" it should say that in everybody's translation. I'm actually using the NIV, so it's kind of, it's not the King James, or but anyway, so "then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Wow. These are the words that you are to speak to the Israelites." And that's a big wow. You said it right, Kent, there, because to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, basically what God was saying there, he was giving them a grand covenant. He was offering them a grand covenant right there. That's what he was doing. And because a kingdom of priests, kingdom of priests and a holy nation, the priests back then are the only ones that had direct access with God. So he's giving everybody, saying, "I want to give you direct access with God. This is it. This is all." That's like what we got with Jesus, basically. Like, he's ready to give them it all. So they if you go down, they said the people, verse 8 says, "The people all responded together, said, 'We will do everything the Lord has said.' So Moses brought their answer back to God. And then the Lord said to Moses, 'I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you.' Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, 'Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day. Because on the third day, that day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people.'" And it goes on, it says, "Put limits for the people around the mountain. Be careful that you don't approach the mountain, don't touch it. And there's some other little rules there, don't have sexual intercourse and these things." So what happens there is God comes down after the third day. And if you guys go to Deuteronomy, actually, wait, Exodus, we're going to go to Exodus 18. So what happens is the people saw the thunder. That's in verse 18, Exodus 20, 18. "When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain of smoke, they trembled with fear, and they stayed at a distance. And they said to Moses, 'Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die.'" Okay? So, and then Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, because God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." But the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. So right there, they got some fear in them. And they said, "No way, Moses, you go talk to him, whatever happens, and you come back to us. You're going to be the middleman. So right there is where they rejected that covenant. Okay, so if you go to, there's a little bit more information on that situation, what happened in Deuteronomy 5:23. So that's a big thing for the Israelites. That's like one of their probably worst moments. That's their worst moment. It is. I would say that's one of their worst moments. So in Deuteronomy 5:23, it has a little bit more detail, I guess, on that, what happened. It said, when you heard the voice out of the darkness while the mountain was ablaze with fire, all the leaders of your tribes and elders came to me, and you said, the Lord your God has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we have heard his voice from the fire. That's important. They heard his voice. They heard his voice audibly, okay? So, and it says, today we have seen that a person can live, right there, even if God speaks with them. But now, why should we die? This great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. For what mortal has ever heard the voice of the living God speaking out of fire, as we have, and survived? Go near and listen to all that the Lord our God says. Then you tell us whatever God tells you, and we will listen and obey.
So they rejected the covenant.
They rejected that covenant right there. And that's where, after they did that, God was obviously a loving God. He wanted to give them everything right there. So after that is when you get the 10 Commandments. And then you have, later on, you have the Levitical laws and all that. It's not just the 10 Commandments. You have the 10 Commandments plus all the Levitical laws. That's the 613. Because what happened is they got the 10 Commandments, which is a kinship. Okay? You don't do this, you be blessed, this and that. But one of the first things I think they did after God gave the 10 Commandments, what did they do? They went and made a big golden cow and all that, and they were worshiping. Oh God, I say, this ain't going to work with you guys. Like, you guys are not working out. So this is where you have the other laws come in, the Levitical laws, because they're stubborn and they wanted like little laws for everything.
Stiff-necked.
You're stiff-necked people. So that's where the law came in. So that's, oh geez, I'm going quite a bit faster than what I thought. So that's good. So from there, that's where, from there to right to the new covenant, it was laws, you follow the laws and this and that and blah blah blah. So the new covenant started. A lot of people think the new covenant started in Matthew 1, but it didn't start then. The new covenant started at the cross, and that's when it was established at the cross. The new covenant was established at the cross. And this is where things became really clear to me. I'm not even using my notes, so that means I know it pretty good. That's good. So what happened here is that Jesus died on the cross. The new covenant was established. It was the beginning of the new covenant. But, so what happened between the covenant and after in the New Testament, if you look, you have examples like Ananias and Sapphira as well. What happened to them? They're under the new covenant. They lie to God, they steal money, and bang, they drop dead.
Oh yeah.
So what's happening there? Are they under the new covenant or not? Because I can tell you this right now, I've lied before, and I haven't been perfect on my tithes, and I'm still alive.
That was the old covenant.
That's right. That's right. Because there's a transition period, and that's where a lot of these filters, they try to make a dividing line. The new covenant started right here, bang, but it didn't start just like that. There was still a lot of things in the Old Testament, or in the New Testament, you see that happen that seem like old covenant kind of style stuff. Well, that's where the date AD 70, where Jesus predicts in Matthew 24, he predicts all these things that were going to happen, that there was going to be destruction and the destruction of the temple and all that was going to happen. Well, in AD 70 is when the Old Covenant was completely done away with. See, the Old Covenant wasn't completely done away with right at the cross. And that's why sometimes we think that way. And that's why when we hear some of the stories in the New Testament, and if they're preached wrong, it can be preached like fear. It can be fear-based, right? Because then because I've been like that, I tell you this. I wasn't tithing that great and all this, and then stuff was happening, bad stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, it's all my fault. It's because I'm not tithing and this and that. I'm not saying you shouldn't tithe. I'm saying we give to God. We tithe. And all these other things, I think, I did. But I'm thinking after I was living like that for so long, I'm thinking, I'm living like if I was in the Old Testament, like in the Old Covenant. And why is that? But I was reading stories in the New Testament that seemed that way. Because I didn't understand that the Old Covenant was actually done away with in AD 70. Because I never heard no one teach that. And only first person that I met was that guy right there. One time we started talking about end times and this stuff and asking, what do you believe in this and that? And he's like, well, I don't believe that. And I'm like, you don't? I was like, holy jump. And I thought I was the only one. And you're kind of scared to tell people what you believe because people will be like, oh, you don't believe that? Well, you're a false prophet and this and that and all that. So I met Peter, and Peter was like the first guy. And then Peter's like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And he's telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa. Oh, really? So that's the Old Covenant. It was done away completely at the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And that's a very important thing to grasp. And if you can study, and if you study Matthew 24, and you start reading Matthew 24, and you start saying all these things will happen in this generation. If you look in Revelation is all about AD 70. The whole thing is about AD 70. There's some things that we can apply to, and there's examples that we can take, some, good examples that we can apply to our lives right now. There is. But at that time, when they said certain things, it meant something to them. And they understood it. That's why when we read it, we're like, earth and heaven and this shall not pass away until this and that. And you're like, well, earth and heaven hasn't passed away right now, so the world is getting dark around us. God's going to come and take me away. But that's not it. That's not what it is. And the only way we understand that is when we understand the New Covenant and we understand when the Old Covenant was done away with. And so for me, that, it just opened up a whole world to me. And then sometimes when I go talk to some people, they won't take it. They won't even open their minds up a little bit. They're very strict on it. Said, no, that's this and that, this and that. And that's fine. But I believe that's the next shift that's coming in the body of Christ. Because we're not going to you can't have revival if you believe in that you're going to get taken away. You can't leave an inheritance for your children's children if you believe that you're going to be taken away. Why would you bother? God is coming to take me. And another thing where I always find is like, God says that we go from glory to glory, from strength to strength, that we reign and rule on this earth as it is in heaven. Well, we don't do that if we're sitting there and saying, ooh, it's getting dark here. Hurry up, Lord. I'm waiting for the rapture. Hurry up. It doesn't work. It's a nice thought. I understand the thought because it feels good, because sometimes it looks like everything around us is like, oh my jumping, like the States, America right now. What's going on? You say, oh my jumping. The end has got to be near. I don't think the end is coming near. It's not anytime soon. Jesus is not coming back anytime soon. In the Bible, it says that there has to be a unity of faith among the believers before he comes back. So we got some work to do, but I believe that's where the switch is going to come. The shift is going to come I was sharing about the 5 realms there a couple weeks ago. I was saying there's, some of you guys weren't here, so I'll share that. There's basically like 5 realms right now. There's the world realm, where we were all in before we got saved. Then there's the church realm. So we get saved, we get in the church realm, we learn, this little light of mine, we learn about salvation, we learn about maybe baptism a little bit, and if we're in a good church, we'll learn about baptism in the Holy Ghost. Doesn't always happen, but we eventually get there. And then, so you have the church realm, and some people in the church realm will graduate into the supernatural realm, which I believe we're in the supernatural realm. I believe every believer here is in the supernatural realm because we all believe in miracles, and we believe for healing. We believe that, we can establish things on the earth as it is in heaven. And then there's a supernatural, and then there's the kingdom realm, which I also believe that we're in. We're kingdom mindset. And that's where, before I was in the supernatural, Patricia King and Sid Roth, and woo, this is awesome, like, wow, all this stuff can happen, woo, laughter, having laughter during a service, like, I love that, I think it's great, that stuff does not bother me one bit, I may not be laughing sometimes, but I can tell you I'm enjoying it. It blesses my heart. Like what happened tonight, that blesses my heart. This is the joy of the Lord. Amen. So this is supernatural. Amen. And we're in the kingdom realm where we have some, like, I would say Peter and Edie and Bridge House Ministries is a kingdom mindset, because they going outside of the 4 walls of the church and the supernatural realm and saying, builders. We're going outside of the kind of 4 walls there because we've been trained and equipped and we're ready to go, and we're going here and we're doing this thing. So, we're kingdom minded. We're going into the marketplace. We're going into all these different places, even in politics, we're going into politics, we're kingdom minded, we're going to advance the kingdom. And then we have the next shift, which is the new covenant. I mean, that's a new covenant realm. And I believe that we're heading for that realm. But I believe we're just in the small parts of it, because there's a lot of filters and mindsets that we still are kind of battling with stuff that we hear sometimes. And, the new covenant realm is really the Father's heart, knowing what what the Father believes about us. Because we're doing this stuff sometimes, I'm in the kingdom, I'm doing all kinds of stuff, but sometimes I'm thinking, like, what's God really thinking of me and stuff, and sometimes our identities, we're not sure who we are. Our identity is not very clear. Well, that's where the new covenant is going to bring us to that place. Amen. And that's going to bring all the denominations a little bit more aligned together to see. So that's when you're going to see, like, the Catholic Church just boom, start getting saved, and they're either going to stay, the Pope is going to get saved, and he's going to start preaching kingdom and all that, or they're just all going to come to Peter's house. They're going to be here, and we're going to train and equip them. And that's like the Muslims. I believe that the Muslims, I don't care if Trudeau wants to bring every Muslim here. Praise the Lord. The harvest field is bigger for me. We don't have to convince anybody about Jesus. We don't have to try to. That's another thing when we realize what the new covenant is. We don't have to go to somebody and say these little tricks. I used to watch this show on TV, and they would say 5 steps to be an evangelist. And the first thing is you go to somebody and you say, have you ever told a lie before? You say, yes. Okay. Have you ever looked at a woman with lust in your eyes? They say, well, yeah, yeah, I did. Okay. Have you ever said the name of God in vain? And they say, yes. So you look at them and you say, okay, so you just admitted to me that you're lying, adultering, and you're using the Father's... You're a sinner. And they say, so you say, so if I meet you if you're at the court of law, and you're before God, are you going to be guilty or innocent? And they're like, well, guilty. And then they'll say, well, you tell them that the punishment of this is hell and all this and this and that. I can tell you something right now. If you bring somebody to God in fear in that way, they're going to leave in fear too. they're not going to stay.
Not
They're-
genuine.
They're not going to stay. We don't convince people of Jesus. We give them Jesus.
Amen.
We give them
Yeah.
Jesus. And then after that, it's up to Jesus and that guy. The work is not on us. That's the new covenant. It goes right from the cross, right from we believe in faith. We're saved, right? We're saved by grace through faith. We're saved by faith. You know? So that's where I believe the church is where we're headed. And it's a glorious thing, and that's where we're, and I think it's small. The school I go to, they're up there, you know, they're like pioneers. A lot of stuff that they're saying and teaching, you're like, whoa. And these are all like, we went to their to the summit. Yeah, we went to their summit this October, and you know, like me and Selena are there, and we're like, you know, we're kind of like old, you know. It's all like younger, 20-something. Not Selena, but me. You know, they're like 20-somethings, and they're all on fire for God, and they're prophesying and stuff, and I'm like, wow, you know. And somebody's, you know, we were sitting beside a young couple, and they're part of Bill Johnson's ministry. You know, they go to Bill Johnson's church and all stuff. Yeah, they go to Bethel and all this, and we didn't know anybody. So when we were there, we're just like, you know, but the fire and the vision and, you know, where they're at, I'm like looking and I'm like, wow.
I want that.
Yeah, I want that. And we were really blessed that weekend, and it was just like, you know, and, you know, and that's going to happen everywhere, right? It's going to happen everywhere. It's going to happen here in Canada, and, you know, and that's a good thing, because I believe revival in Canada is going to happen in the East. I really believe that. I've been saying that for a long time, and I believe it's going to happen, because we're the ones that are least looked at. So I believe everybody's looking out west, you know, looking at Alberta, because they got all the money, and they got the oil, and this and that, and everybody's looking over there, and it's like the Bible Belt of Canada. You know, there's a church, you know, there's mega churches everywhere. You know, you plant the church there, and the next day it's a mega church. Right? You know, so everybody's kind of looking over there to them, but I think it's going to happen here in the Maritime, because we can go through the storms, right? We know how to, you know, keep pushing and keep praying and keep going, and right. So when the fruit of our labors happen, we're going to be mature enough to handle it. So when the $1 million comes to Peter, he's mature enough to handle it, because he understands the new covenant and kingdom and all that. And
Amen.
so I wasn't going to talk about that stuff, and I skipped like half of these pages, because I was going to talk about the new covenant. Is the law of Christ is basically the law of love. You know, there's when you've seen, I'm not sure what scriptures it is, but when the two Pharisees, they come to Jesus and they say, they ask him, what's the greatest commandments or whatever, and Jesus sums up, and people always say this thing, and this is where we get the old covenant mixed with the new. He says, well, the two first commandment is love yourself as you love your neighbor, and the second commandment is just like one of these or whatever, and he sums up the 10 commandments in 2 commandments. That's all he does. He's not, but there's another scripture where he gives a new command. I got that right here, because when I read that, I was like, oh yeah.
Walk in obedience and love.
It's love. The new command, he says, I give you. Yeah, it's right here. It's in John 13:34. So, and the other place is Matthew 22:34. That's where the Pharisees come to him, and they say, you know, they ask Jesus, which is the greatest commandment in the law, the old covenant? And he says, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, your soul, mind, and strength. We quote that all the time. And he said the second greatest commandment is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And he said, Jesus said, all the law and the prophets hang on those 2 commandments. Not us. We don't hang on those 2 commandments. We hang on this commandment, because he gave us a new commandment that says, in John 13:34, says, Jesus says this, a new command I give you, as I loved you, as he loved us, you must love one another.
Amen.
That's a big difference than loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Because sometimes, I don't think my neighbor would want him, for me to love him like I love myself sometimes, right? Sometimes I'm not always in the new covenant. Sometimes I'm struggling, right? So, but that's the new command that God gave us, is love as I have loved you. And that's a world of a difference. That's new covenant right there. That's new covenant to the max. The other is, you hear that quoted sometimes, love God with all your heart, and we do, but this is not the command that he gave us. He gave us a new command, and if you look, like I got 25 scriptures here, and it's all throughout the New Testament in different places where it comes down to love, and the different kinds of love. It's not just, oh, I love you, and, lovey-dovey-dovey, and we're all, hippies, flower power and stuff, the love revolution, that, I'm all for hippies and stuff like that, but it didn't last, right? The hippies, sometimes I wish that hippies would come back, because some of the trends these days are kind of crazy, but that's not the kind of love that's, it's agape love. It's agape love that Jesus has, and that's how we're supposed to love others. So, so I guess that's it.
Good. That's good.
Amen. Let's give Mark a great hand.
I think we'll get him to do a part 2 next week, so we can cover some of the other covenants. How many thought that was a very good history lesson?
Yes.
And one of the things that last year when we talked a little bit about dispensationalism with end time stuff, I said Mark is going to help teach this, and he wasn't even enrolled at Jonathan Welton yet, which is where they learn a lot of the end time stuff according to Kingdom. So we did a little bit of that at the conference last year, and it is one of the courses that we would like to teach here. I've been saying it for over a year. We've been operating this ministry now for it was the anniversary was somewhere in November, because we started in November, so we've been over a year now teaching classes here and doing this Friday night. So it's very important. He talked about the 70 AD. Most Christians don't have a clue. I would say almost 100% of Christians don't even know, if you say 70 AD, what you're talking about. And it's biblical history. It's what Jesus prophesied.